The workshop smelled like it always did, motor oil and sawdust, with a hint of that bitter cold seeping through the walls. Earl had his hands on the Chevelle's engine, wrenched halfway to a bolt when he heard the front door scrape against the frame. 11 o'clock at night, book club got out at 9. Linda's footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, and when Earl straightened up, he saw her, makeup smeared down one cheek, coat half buttoned, and on her left forearm, purple bruises blooming in the shape of fingers. She didn't try to hide them, just stood there in the doorway with the snow tapping at the window behind her and said, "Travis got rough. I need you to go talk to him." Earl stared at his wife of 38 years. The furnace hummed. Merle Haggard played low on the radio. "Tell him to back off," Linda added. Then came the line that broke something inside him. "You owe me. I stayed, didn't I?" Earl set down the wrench, picked up his truck keys, and laughed. Not mean, just empty. He walked past her without a word. The morning before Linda came home with those bruises, Earl had been sitting in his usual booth at Maggie's diner. 6:30, like always. The coffee was already there. Black, no sugar, because Maggie knew. "Morning, Earl," Bill said, sliding into the booth across from him. Dutch and Pete followed, Gene bringing up the rear with his newspaper tucked under one arm. "Morning, boys." Earl wrapped his hands around the mug. Outside, the thermometer on the bank sign read 12 degrees, cold enough to freeze the balls off a pool table. Bill caught Maggie's eye, pointed at Earl's coffee, then made a circle with his finger, the whole crew. Maggie nodded and headed for the pot. "You doing all right, Earl?" Bill's question came out casual, but his eyes weren't. "Same as ever." Dutch folded his hands on the table. "Saw Linda's car over at that gym. Fit for life. Thursday morning, about 9. Book club's at 7, Pete added, just stating facts. Earl took a long drink of coffee. Bitter, hot, real. "She's got her schedule. I got mine." The crew exchanged looks, the kind men give each other when there's a thing nobody wants to say out loud. Maggie arrived with the pot, refilled everyone without asking, and when she got to Earl, her hand came down on his shoulder, squeezed once, moved on. "How's that Chevelle coming?" Gene asked, changing the subject like men do. "Slow. Needs a new carburetor. Might have one coming in next week." They talked trucks and weather and Pete's granddaughter making honor roll, normal things. But underneath it all, Earl could feel them watching him, protective, like they knew something he'd been working real hard not to know. When he left, Pete called after him. "Earl, you ever need anything, you call." Earl nodded, didn't understand why Pete's voice sounded so serious. That evening in the workshop, Earl's hands had been steady. They'd been steady through a lot of things. He thought about Thanksgiving 2 years back. Linda on her phone the whole time, laughing at something. Earl at the stove making the turkey, the stuffing, the cranberry sauce. She hadn't looked up once. He thought about their anniversary 6 months ago. "Want to go out to dinner?" he'd asked. Linda had rolled her eyes. "I'm busy, Earl." He thought about the guest bedroom. 2 years she'd been sleeping in there. "You snore," she'd said. He'd accepted it without a fight, like he accepted everything. The church bulletin in the trash last month. Book club canceled, stamped across October in red ink. But Linda kept going out Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, coming home late with that smell of men's cologne that wasn't his. Earl had known. Of course he'd known. A man doesn't live with a woman for 38 years without knowing when she's lying. He just figured, what? That she'd get bored? That it would end? That keeping his mouth shut was somehow the same thing as keeping his dignity? The wrench in his hand had felt heavier with every year he added up. When Linda walked in at 11 with those bruises, asking him to clean up her mess like he was the help, something in Earl's chest had just stopped. 38 years of this horseshit, no more. The Motel 6 clerk barely looked up when Earl walked in at 11:30. Snow was falling harder now, the kind that sticks. "Room for the night," Earl said. $52. Earl paid cash, took the key to room 14, carried in his duffel bag and his toolbox and the thermos he'd grabbed on the way out. There was a photo of Jessica tucked in the bag, his daughter at 3 years old, before Linda. He hadn't grabbed his wedding photo, hadn't even thought about it. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. The ice machine thunked through the wall every few minutes. Earl set his toolbox on the desk, his duffel on the bed. His phone buzzed, Linda calling. Earl stared at the screen, watched her name light up, Linda Mobile. His finger hovered over the answer button. 38 years of answering. He hit decline. The phone stopped buzzing. In the silence, Earl sat down on the edge of the bed, still wearing his boots, still wearing his coat, and took off his wedding ring for the first time since 1987. Set it on the nightstand where it caught the light from the parking lot. He lay back on the thin bedspread and stared at the popcorn ceiling, listened to the ice machine, listened to a TV through the wall playing some late-night show. listened to his own breathing. The phone buzzed again, Linda, then stopped. Earl closed his eyes, thought, let her wonder. For once in her life, let her wonder where I am. Through the window, the snow kept falling, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Earl slept without someone's sighs waking him up every hour. The first morning, Earl made instant coffee in the little machine by the bathroom sink. Tasted like rust and regret, but it was hot. He sat on the bed, watching the local news with the sound turned down low, and for about 10 minutes, he felt something like freedom. No one asking him to fix something, no one sighing when he talked, just him and a bad cup of coffee in a room that didn't hold 38 years of cold shoulders. He drove past the house around 8. Linda's car was in the driveway, lights on in the kitchen, life going on without him like he'd never been there at all. Earl went to McDonald's for breakfast instead of Maggie's. Couldn't face the questions yet. Day 2, he took his laundry to the place on 5th Street. First time in 38 years washing his own clothes. He folded them careful, hospital corners on his t-shirts, creases sharp in his jeans, while an old woman 2 machines over watched him with pity in her eyes. At the gas station, the kid, pumping gas next to him, said, "Hey, you're staying at the Motel 6, right? Everything okay?" "Just fine," Earl said, hearing the defensive edge in his own voice. 2 guys, over by the motor oil, were talking. Earl caught part of it while he was paying inside. "That's the guy whose wife is screwing her trainer. He just left her there bleeding." "What kind of man does that?" Earl's hand tightened on his wallet. His whole body wanted to turn around, correct them, explain. But what would he say? Actually, she's been cheating for months, and the bruises were from her boyfriend, and she wanted me to fight her battles for her? He'd sound crazy, or bitter, or both. So he paid, loaded his truck, and drove away with his hands shaking on the wheel. Back at the motel, his phone buzzed. A text from Pastor Greg. "Heard you're staying elsewhere. Coffee sometime? Grace is available." Earl set the phone down without answering, lay on the bed, flipped channels, without watching any of them. The world outside kept moving. Inside room 14, time moved different, thicker, like trying to walk through mud. His phone rang that evening. Jessica. For half a second, Earl's heart jumped. Maybe his daughter would understand. Maybe blood knew blood. "Hey, Jess." "Dad." Her voice was tight, angry. "What the hell is going on?" Earl sat up straighter. "What did your mother tell you?" "Mom called me crying. She has bruises, Dad. Bruises. And you just left her?" "Jess, those bruises aren't from me. She told me everything. About the affair she ended, about Travis harassing her, about you knowing for months and doing nothing." "That's not what happened." "You're calling Mom a liar?" "Dad, I saw a photo of the bruises. She's scared." Earl rubbed his face. "How did you compress 38 years into one phone call? How did you make someone understand that this wasn't about the bruises or the affair, but about the way Linda had looked at him when she said, 'You owe me'?" "She asked me to confront him," Earl said, his voice cracking. "Her lover. She wanted me to clean up her mess like I'm the janitor." "That doesn't give you the right to abandon her. What kind of man does that?" The words hit like a fist. What kind of man? "The kind who's been disrespected for 38 years, Earl said quietly, and finally had enough. "I can't believe you. I thought you were better than this." Jessica's voice was shaking now. "Don't call me until you fix this." The line went dead. Earl sat there holding the phone, listening to the dial tone until it turned to silence. On the desk, his gas station sandwich sat untouched. His stomach was in knots. His own daughter, his own blood. Thought he was the monster. The next morning, Earl needed supplies. Couldn't live on gas station food forever. He drove to Safeway, trying to look like a man who had his life together. In the motor oil aisle, he heard voices. 2 younger guys, maybe in their 30s, talking around the corner where they couldn't see him. "That's the guy whose wife is fucking her trainer. He just left her there bleeding." What a piece of shit. Who does that? Cold bastard. Apparently he knew for months and didn't care. Earl's knuckles went white on the shopping cart handle. Every muscle in his body tensed. He could step around that corner, could set them straight, could defend himself. But then what? They'd see a crazy old man trying to explain why his wife's affair wasn't his fault. They'd see exactly what Linda wanted them to see. Earl finished his shopping, went through checkout where Nancy, a woman he'd known for 20 years, wouldn't meet his eyes. She bagged his groceries quick, no small talk, just that awful pitying look people give to stray dogs. He loaded his truck, sat behind the wheel with the engine running and the heater blasting, stared at the motel room door across the parking lot, realized, I can't win by fighting, can't win by hiding, I'm just stuck. Inside room 14, the ice machine kept thunking, his phone stayed silent, no one was calling to ask his side, and outside, the town kept talking, kept deciding who he was, kept writing his story without asking him a single question. Earl set his head against the steering wheel, felt every one of his 67 years in his back, his knees, his hands, wondered how long a man could hold on when the whole world had already made up its mind. 3 days passed like that, maybe 4. Earl lost track. He'd wake at 5 in the morning, habit from 40 years of work, and make that terrible instant coffee. Stare at the TV without really watching. The local news, some cooking show, didn't matter, just noise to fill the room. He was eating once a day, gas station jerky, crackers from the vending machine. His jeans were getting loose. Had to tighten his belt one notch. His back ached from the thin mattress. His hands shook, and not from the cold. At 3 in the morning, he'd wake up to the ice machine clunking and lie there replaying every moment of the last 38 years. Should have left in 95 when she laughed at his promotion to shop foreman. Should have left in 03 when the separate bedrooms started. Should have left 1,000 times, but he'd thought, what? That staying was noble? That suffering in silence was the same thing as being strong? He dreamed about Linda and Travis at the diner, laughing through the frosted window while Earl stood outside banging on the glass. They couldn't hear him, or wouldn't. He dreamed about Jessica as a little girl, 3 years old, asking, "Why won't you fight for us, Daddy?" The motel room was getting smaller. Earl could feel the walls pressing in. On the 7th morning, he forced himself to shower, shave, put on clean clothes, looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, thinner, older, eyes hollow like something had been scooped out of him. Can't hide forever, he told his reflection. He drove to Maggie's diner, sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before he could make himself go inside. The breakfast crew was already there when Earl walked in. 7 in the morning, just like always. The booth was waiting. Bill looked up. Earl stood and shook his hand, holding eye contact longer than usual. Good to see you. Earl slid into the booth. Maggie materialized with the coffee pot before he could even settle, poured without a word, and let her hand rest on his shoulder. Not long, just enough. The room didn't fall silent when he entered. That would have been easier. Instead, people forced normal, kept their conversations going, pretended not to notice. But Earl could feel the weight of it, some sympathetic, some judging, all of them watching. Folks are talking, Dutch said once Maggie had moved on. We've been hearing things. What's she saying? Earl asked. That you knew about Travis for months, Jean said. Didn't care. Abandoned her when she got hurt. Pete leaned forward. Want you to know, we're not buying it. Something in Earl's chest loosened. First time in a week someone had said that. First time someone had validated what he knew to be true. We've seen her with that gym rat, Bill said. Months now. At the diner parking lot, Tuesdays and Thursdays, holding hands, laughing. Half the town knows, Dutch added. The other half's just too polite to say. Maggie returned with eggs and bacon, set the plate in front of Earl. On the house. Earl tried to argue. She walked away. He ate slowly. First real meal in days. Tasted like hope, small and fragile as it was. Around the diner, Earl could see people noticing him. Some nodded, solidarity. Others whispered to their companions. Judgment came in both flavors, but the crew stayed. Talked about normal things, weather turning, Dutch's new roof going on next week, Pete's granddaughter's basketball game. They didn't force Earl to talk about Linda, didn't ask what he was going to do, just sat with him. When he reached for his wallet, Bill stopped him. Already paid. Earl nodded. Couldn't quite speak past the lump in his throat. At the door, Maggie caught his arm. Earl, the folks who matter, they know the truth. Give it time. Back at the motel, Earl had almost convinced himself things might be okay when someone knocked on the door. 2 in the afternoon. He checked the peephole. Pastor Greg. Earl considered not answering, but the pastor had seen his truck. No point pretending. Pastor, Earl said, opening the door. Earl, mind if I come in? The room was embarrassing. Unmade bed, empty coffee cups, his toolbox on the desk like some kind of security blanket. But Earl stepped aside anyway. Pastor Greg took the desk chair. Earl sat on the edge of the bed. Tell me what happened, Greg said. No preamble, no sermon, just your words. Earl had told the story so many times in his head that it came out halting, broken. She's been having an affair. I knew, didn't confront her, figured she'd end it or I don't know. Then she came home with bruises. From him. Asked me to go talk to him, like I'm supposed to clean up her mess. And you left instead. She said I owed her, that she stayed. Like, our marriage was her doing me a favor. Earl's voice cracked. 38 years, Greg. I've been the steady one, the fixer, the guy who doesn't complain, and she treated it like I was staff. That's a heavy burden. I just want to not be the villain in my own story. Pastor Greg was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll listen before I judge. That's what grace requires, but Earl, forgiveness and returning aren't the same thing. I'm not going back. Then we'll walk that road, but the church will talk. They already are. Greg stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Christmas Eve potluck is in a few days. You're welcome, Earl. Both of you are. But if only one of you comes, that's okay too. After the pastor left, Earl sat alone in the quiet, stared at the words echoing in his head. Forgiveness and returning aren't the same thing. Maybe a man could forgive without going back. Maybe that was allowed. He didn't know yet. But for the first time, in a week, the question didn't feel like drowning. The next morning at Maggie's, the crew was waiting for him. Not in their usual relaxed way. This was purposeful. Bill gestured to the booth. Sit. We need to talk strategy. Strategy for what? Earl slid in across from him. For not letting Linda bury you in horse shit, Dutch said. Pete leaned forward. You're not fighting back. That's fine. But you can't just sit there either. Jean, quiet until now. Sometimes the fight is standing still and letting them trip over their own lies. Bill's approach was military precise. Made sense. He'd done 2 tours in Vietnam. Assess the situation. Linda's story has holes. Travis is a liability for her. Public opinion shifts when facts come out. I've been documenting, Dutch said. Dates, times I saw them together. Written it all down. Jim's got rumors about Travis, too, Pete added. Money missing. He's not clean. Earl felt overwhelmed. What am I supposed to do with all this? Nothing yet, Bill said. Just know you've got backup when you need it. Jean folded the newspaper he'd been reading. Truth leaks out, Earl. Slower than lies, but it sticks better. Why are you doing this? Earl asked. Bill's answer was simple. Because you're a good man getting a raw deal. We don't stand for that. Maggie came over with a fresh pot, poured for everyone, and did something she rarely did. Sat down with them. I've got something too, she said. But that's for later, when you're ready. Earl was back at the motel that afternoon when Maggie knocked. She had a thermos in one hand and something small in the other. Figured you could use better coffee than what that machine makes, she said. Earl let her in. She set the thermos on the desk, then held out her other hand. A USB drive. Parking lot camera faces the street, Maggie said. Linda and Travis have been meeting for coffee before his morning shift. 6 months of footage. Earl stared at the drive. You've been recording them? Camera records everything. I just kept it. Figured truth might matter someday. She left him alone with it. Earl plugged the drive into his laptop, opened the files, folders organized by date, September through November. He watched methodically. Didn't fast forward, saw every frame. Linda and Travis at the outdoor tables, September sunshine, laughing, holding hands across the table, October, a kiss. November, Travis's hand on Linda's knee, her leaning into him. One clip from October made Earl's stomach turn. Linda was pointing through the diner window, right at Earl's back where he sat inside with the breakfast crew. Travis threw his head back, laughing. Linda shrugged, smiling. Another from mid-November, Linda and Travis arguing. No audio, but Earl could read the body language. Linda grabbed Travis's arm. Travis yanked away, rough. That's where the bruises came from, not abuse. Just a man pulling away from someone who wouldn't let go. Earl closed the laptop, sat in the silence of room 14. He wasn't angry, just tired, and vindicated. He wasn't crazy, wasn't paranoid. It had all been real. He put the USB drive in his duffel bag. Could send it to Jessica, could send it to Pastor Greg, could post it online for the whole town to see. But he didn't. Not sure what I'm going to do with this, he said to the empty room. But I know what I'm not going to do. He wouldn't weaponize it. Not yet, maybe not ever. Some things a man held back, not because he was weak, but because he was still trying to be decent. His phone rang. Jessica. Earl's hand shook as he reached for it. Meanwhile, across town, Jessica was standing in her parents' house in the master bedroom. She'd flown in from Denver yesterday to help Linda pack Earl's things. That's what her mother had asked for. Mail him his stuff. Jessica had opened the nightstand drawer looking for Earl's reading glasses and found a phone. Not Linda's iPhone. A cheap Android, charging cable plugged in. She picked it up. No password, unlocked right into the messages. Contact Travis. Months of texts. Jessica's stomach dropped as she scrolled. September. Saw Earl at diner. Too stupid to notice we're together. God, he's pathetic. October. 38 years of a meal ticket. I'm not giving that up until I have you secured. November. Earl's working late again. We could meet at your place. And after the fight, Linda. You pushed me. I have bruises. This is your fault. Travis. You grabbed my arm. I pushed you away. Stop saying I hit you. You're trying to trap me. Linda. If I can get Earl to confront you, either you commit or he looks like the bad guy. Win-win. Jessica sat down hard on the bed. Read everything twice. Her hands were shaking. Nausea rolled through her. 38 years of defending her mother, of telling Dad to just let it go and keep the peace, of making excuses. All of it. All of it had been for this. A woman who called her husband a meal ticket, who orchestrated confrontations for her own benefit, who'd been cruel in ways Jessica couldn't have imagined. She heard Linda's car in the driveway, wiped her face, put the phone in her pocket. Downstairs, Linda came in with shopping bags. Did you pack his things? Jessica's voice came out cold. We need to talk, now. About what? Jessica held up the burner phone. About this. Linda's face went through several expressions in quick succession, panic, then defensive anger. But Jessica was already dialing. Her father needed to know. She'd been wrong. God, she'd been so wrong. The phone rang and rang. Come on, Dad, Jessica whispered. Pick up, please, pick up. Earl answered on the third ring. Jess? Dad. Her voice was thick with tears. Dad, I'm so sorry. Earl sat up straighter on the motel bed. What happened? I found her other phone. I read everything, every cruel thing she said about you, for months. Jessica was crying now, trying to talk through it. Years, probably. Earl was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. That's it? Just okay? Dad, I called you a monster. I chose her lie over you. You didn't know, Jess. She's your mother. That doesn't excuse it. Jessica's voice cracked. I should have listened. I should have asked your side. I chose the easy story because it was easier than believing Mom could be that cruel. You're choosing right now, Earl said quietly. That's what matters. Are you really okay? At that motel? Earl looked around room 14, the unmade bed, the coffee cups, the wedding ring still sitting on the nightstand. No, but I'm better than I was at the house. For the next hour, they talked. Really talked. Jessica asked questions, and Earl told her things he'd never said out loud. About the separate bedrooms, about Linda's dismissals, about 38 years of feeling like he was tolerated instead of loved. She said, you owe me, Earl said, like staying married to me was some kind of favor she'd done. Jessica cried through most of it. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have seen it. All those times I told you to just keep the peace. You were trying to hold your family together. Can't fault you for that. Yes, I can. I should have asked your side. I should have... She stopped. I'm changing my flight. Coming back on the 23rd instead of after New Year. I want to be there for Christmas. With you. Something warm moved through Earl's chest. First time in days. I'd like that, Jess. After they hung up, Earl sat with the phone in his hand. Smiled for the first time in a week. His daughter, his blood. She'd come around. He looked at the duffel bag where the USB drive was hidden. Jessica had the texts. He had the video. 2 witnesses to the truth now. But he still didn't plan to use them. Not unless he had to. Some things you held back, not from weakness, but from wanting to be better than the mess you were in. The same day Earl was talking to Jessica, Travis Malone was being called into the manager's office at Fit for Life Gym. Frank, the owner, had a folder open on his desk. Bank statements, training logs. His face was hard. Sit down, Travis. Travis sat, tried to look casual. What's this about? We're missing about $8,000. Cash deposits don't match the training sessions logged. Care to explain? I don't know what you're talking about. Frank slid a paper across the desk. 14 months of skim session fees. You pocketed cash, marked them as comp sessions. I've got the receipts, Travis. Every single one. Sweat broke out on Travis's forehead. Look, I can pay it back. You're done. Clean out your locker. And if you contest this, I'm calling the cops. 20 minutes later, Travis was walking through the gym with a cardboard box, his buddies watching from the weight benches, not meeting his eyes. Yesterday, he'd been the guy, young, confident, had all the older ladies charmed. Now he was just another thief getting walked out. He tried calling Linda from his truck, straight to voicemail. Tried again, same thing. Linda, I need to talk. They fired me. Call me back. She didn't. He drove home to his apartment. The door was unlocked. When he walked in, half the place was empty. Amber's stuff, gone. Baby supplies, gone. The nursery they'd been setting up, stripped bare. There was a note on the kitchen counter in her handwriting. I know about Linda. I know about the lies. I'm staying with my mom. Don't contact me. My lawyer will. Travis crumpled the note, punched the wall hard enough to put a dent in the drywall, sat down on the floor with his back against the cabinets. Job gone. Baby gone. The older woman who'd promised him an easy life was now ghosting his calls. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, then another. Sat on the couch in the empty apartment, drinking alone while it got dark outside. Scrolled through his phone to Linda's number. Blocked. God damn it, he said to nobody. For the first time, Travis understood. Linda had used him the same way he'd been using her, and now they were both left holding nothing. 2 days later, Earl's phone rang with an Idaho number he didn't recognize. Hello? Earl, it's Diane, Linda's sister. Earl went still. Diane, hi. I'm calling because Linda's version of events isn't adding up. Diane's voice was careful. I want to hear your side. What did she tell you? That you knew about an affair for months, did nothing, then abandoned her when she got hurt, but Linda's always been dramatic. And some details don't fit. Earl kept his voice measured. We grew apart. She made choices. I made mine. That's diplomatic. What really happened? So Earl told her, abbreviated, the affair he'd known about, the bruises from Travis, not from him, Linda's demand that he confront her lover. That line, you owe me. Diane sighed. That sounds more like Linda. She's always needed to be the victim in every story. I'm sorry, Earl. Not your fault. She called asking if she could move in with me for a while. I said yes, but I wanted to know if I'm harboring someone who wronged you. She's your sister, Earl said. You do what you need to. I'm not asking anyone to choose sides. You're a better man than she deserved. I'm sorry you carried this alone for so long. After Diane hung up, Earl sat in the quiet of the motel room. Even Linda's own family saw through it. The truth was leaking out through the cracks. His phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Landed in Denver, renting a car, driving up tomorrow morning, breakfast at 8? Earl texted back, Maggie's Diner, I'll be there. Another text arrived. Pastor Greg, hope to see you Christmas Eve, potluck starts at 5. Earl stared at that one longer. Christmas Eve was tomorrow, Linda would probably be there. Playing victim, working the sympathy angle. He didn't reply to the pastor yet, just set the phone down and looked at the calendar on the motel desk. December 23rd. Day. Christmas Eve tomorrow. Time to decide, keep hiding or face the music. Jessica was already at the diner when Earl arrived at 8 the next morning. She stood up from the booth when she saw him, and for a second they just looked at each other. She looked older than he remembered, tired. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. He looked thinner, worn down, like the weight of the last 2 weeks had carved something out of him. Jessica moved first, crossed the space between them and hugged him hard. Earl stiffened, wasn't used to affection anymore, but then his arms came up and he held his daughter. God, it's good to see you, Jessica said into his shoulder. You too, Jess. They sat. Maggie appeared immediately with coffee, her face breaking into a rare, full smile when she saw Jessica. Little Jessie Davidson, haven't seen you in years. Hi, Maggie. Jessica's voice was thick. Thank you for being there for Dad. Maggie squeezed her shoulder. He's family, always has been. After she left, Jessica looked at Earl across the table. Really looked. Dad, you can't stay at that motel. It's fine for now. It's awful. After Christmas, we're finding you a real place. I'm helping. Earl didn't argue, just nodded. Breakfast arrived. Eggs, bacon, hash browns, real food. They ate mostly in silence at first, just being together. The breakfast crew stopped by the table. Bill shook Jessica's hand. Your dad's got a lot of friends here. Want you to know that. Thank you, Jessica said, for being there when I wasn't. After they left, Jessica leaned forward. Christmas Eve potluck. Are you going? thinking about it. You? If you go, I go. Jessica's jaw set in a way that reminded Earl of himself. And if Mom's there, I'm done protecting her, Dad. Don't fight my battles, Jess. Not your battle, mine. I spent 43 years enabling her. That stops now. Earl saw the determination in his daughter's face, recognized his own stubbornness there. All right, we'll go, together. Christmas Eve morning, Jessica knocked on Earl's motel room door at 7 with coffee and donuts from the gas station. They sat on the edge of the bed, watching the morning news, not talking much, just being. Nervous? Jessica asked eventually. More tired than nervous. Just want it done. Jessica stood up, went to Earl's duffel bag. Come on, let's pick out what you're wearing. She pulled out his clean flannel, blue, pressed, and his work boots, held them up. These. You look respectable. You look like you. Earl took them. Don't need to look respectable. Just need to be honest. At 4:30, they drove separately to the church. Earl in his truck, Jessica in her rental. The parking lot was mostly empty still. Cold wind cut across the lot, snow threatening in the clouds. They stood by Earl's truck for a moment. Ready? Jessica asked. As I'll ever be. Inside the church basement, it smelled like pine cleaner and cinnamon rolls, long tables set up for the potluck, Christmas decorations on every wall, coffee percolating in the big urn. The breakfast crew was already there. Bill had promised to come early. They stood when Earl and Jessica entered, formed a kind of wall around them, protective. You need anything, you just say the word, Bill said quietly. Earl nodded, couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. People started arriving. The room filled up. Some folks nodded at Earl. Solidarity. Others avoided his eyes. The town was divided, like towns get when there's been scandal. Pastor Greg found Earl, shook his hand. Glad you came. 5:15, then 5:20. Linda hadn't showed. Maybe she wouldn't, Earl thought. Maybe she'd stay away, and this would all just fade. At 5:30, the door opened. Linda stood in the doorway, moving slow, careful. Her wrists were wrapped in white bandages, visible, obvious, theatrical. She was pale, hair pulled back, no makeup, playing the part of wounded bird. Sympathy murmurs rippled through the room. Church ladies moved toward her, but, Linda, are you okay? We've been praying for you. Linda's voice came out small, martyred. I'm managing. It's been so hard. Her eyes found Earl across the room, found Jessica sitting next to him. Her face went hard for just a second before the mask slipped back on. She made her way to a table on the far side, surrounded immediately by sympathetic women, set herself up like a queen holding court. Earl stayed where he was, didn't move, didn't react, just sat with Jessica on one side and Bill on the other. Pastor Greg stood at the front. Let's give thanks for this meal and for gathering together, for family in all its forms. People started eating, talking, the normal rhythm of a church potluck. But the tension in the room was like a wire pulled tight. Linda got up eventually, made her way to the dessert table. Jessica stood at the same time, intercepting her near the pies. Mom, Linda's smile was tight. Jessica, I didn't expect you. We need to talk, now. Not here, Jessica. This isn't the place. Jessica's voice got louder. Yes, here. Because you've been talking here, telling your version. The room started to quiet, people pretending not to listen but turning their heads. Sweetie, you're making a scene. Good. About time someone did. Jessica pulled the burner phone out of her pocket, held it up where people could see. Linda's face went through several expressions. Panic, anger, fear. She reached for it. Give me that. Jessica pulled it back. Everyone here deserves the truth. Pastor Greg was moving toward them now. What's going on? Jessica turned to face the room, her voice carried. My mother has been lying, and I can prove it. The room went dead silent. Linda grabbed Jessica's arm. Jessica, don't. Jessica pulled away, looked at her mother, at the bandaged wrists, at the performance of victimhood. And she started reading. Jessica's voice cut through the church basement like a knife, clear, steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mom's been telling everyone Dad abandoned her, that he knew about an affair and did nothing, that he's cold and cruel. She looked around the room. Every eye was on her now. But here's what she really said, in text to her lover, Travis. Linda tried again. Jessica, stop this. Jessica started reading. September, saw Earl at diner, too stupid to notice we're together. God, he's pathetic. Gasps rippled through the room. Earl sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table in front of him, didn't move, didn't speak. October, Jessica continued. 38 years of a meal ticket. I'm not giving that up until I have you secured. More gasps. Someone said, "Oh my lord." Linda's face was red now. That's out of context. You don't understand. November, Jessica read over her. Travis's text. You grabbed my arm and I pushed away. Stop saying I hit you. She held up the phone higher. The bruises weren't from abuse, Mom. They were from you grabbing him when he tried to leave. The room erupted in murmurs. People turning to each other, looking at Linda, looking at Earl. And my favorite, Jessica said, her voice shaking now with anger. November 28th. If I can get Earl to confront Travis, either Travis commits or Earl looks like the bad guy. Win-win. Dead silence. Jessica turned to face her mother fully. You orchestrated all of it. The confrontation, the victim story, everything. Linda was crying now, but these weren't the controlled tears from before. These were panic. You don't understand what it's like, being married to someone who doesn't love you. Dad loved you, Jessica's voice cracked. For 38 years, he loved you, and you called him a meal ticket. Pastor Greg stepped forward. His face was troubled, disappointed. Linda, is this true? Linda looked around the room, searching for support, for someone to defend her, but people were looking away. The church ladies who'd surrounded her earlier had stepped back. Greg, it's complicated. Did you write these texts? Linda's mouth opened, closed. No words came out. Pastor Greg's voice was gentle but firm. Linda, I think it's best if you leave tonight. We can talk about this later, in private. You're going to believe this? Linda's voice pitched higher, desperate. You're all just going to throw me out? After everything? Bill stood up from his table. His voice carried. Earl's a good man. Been a good man through all this. Dutch stood next to him. Amen to that? Around the room, heads nodded. Not everyone. Some people still looked uncertain, uncomfortable. But enough. Enough that Linda could see the tide had turned. She grabbed her coat from the back of her chair, fumbled with the buttons. Her hands were shaking. She stopped at Earl's table on her way out, leaned down close to his face. This is what you wanted? To humiliate me? Earl spoke for the first time all evening. His voice was quiet, calm. I didn't say a word, Linda. It was true. He'd just sat there. Hadn't defended himself, hadn't attacked, just existed. Let the truth speak for itself. Linda's face twisted. She rushed for the door. A moment later, they heard her car start outside, tires spinning on the icy parking lot as she drove away too fast. The room stayed silent for a long moment after she left. Pastor Greg cleared his throat. Let's give thanks for truth, even when it's hard, and for grace, which we all need. He paused. The potluck will continue. Please, eat. This is still Christmas Eve. Still a time for gathering. Slowly, awkwardly, conversations resumed. People went back to their plates. The volume rose gradually, filling the space Linda's departure had left. Earl sat very still. Jessica sank into the chair next to him, put her hand on his shoulder. She was shaking. You okay? Bill asked quietly. Earl took a breath, let it out. Yeah, just tired. It's done now, Pete said. Yeah, Earl repeated. It's done. And it was. After 38 years of holding it in, of taking it quiet, of being the steady one, it was done. The truth was out. Everyone had heard it. So why did he feel so empty? They stayed for another hour. Earl and Jessica sat with the breakfast crew, eating cherry pie and drinking coffee while the room gradually returned to something like normal. Christmas carols played softly from someone's phone. Kids ran around between the tables. Life went on. People approached Earl throughout the evening, some to apologize. An older woman, Mrs. Henderson, taught Sunday school, touched his arm. I'm sorry, Earl. We should have known better than to believe gossip. It's all right, ma'am. No, it's not. But thank you for being gracious. Others just squeezed his shoulder as they passed. Silent support, the kind men give when words won't do the job. Pastor Greg sat with them for a while, didn't say much, just drank coffee and nodded when Bill told a story about their army days. Being present. That was what mattered. Around 8 o'clock, the crowd started thinning. Jessica looked at Earl. Ready to go? Yeah. Outside in the parking lot, the cold hit like a wall. Clear sky now, stars out, temperature dropping fast. Earl's breath came out in clouds. How do you feel? Jessica asked. Earl considered the question, looked up at the stars, thought about Linda's face when she'd been caught, about the church ladies stepping back, about his own silence through it all. Empty, he said finally, but in a good way, like something heavy's finally off. What now? Now we figure out what comes next. They drove back to the motel in separate cars, Christmas lights blinking in the town windows. The Motel 6 sign glowed against the dark sky. Room 14, waiting. Jessica hugged him in the parking lot. Call if you need anything. I'm right next door. I will. Inside, Earl sat on the edge of the bed, still dressed, still wearing his boots, didn't turn on the TV, just sat in the quiet, listening to the ice machine thunk through the wall, hearing the distant sound of highway traffic, the church bells somewhere in town striking 9. The wedding ring was still on the nightstand where he'd left it 2 weeks ago. Earl picked it up, looked at it in the dim light from the parking lot. 38 years in a circle of gold. He set it back down. Eventually, he changed into his sleep clothes, lay down on the thin mattress, stared at the ceiling. No dreams came that night, just dark and rest, and the slow turn of December 24th into December 25th. Christmas morning would bring new questions. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, Earl slept without the weight of lies pressing down on his chest. Outside, snow started to fall, soft, quiet, covering everything in white. The day after Christmas, Linda called. Earl was sitting in his motel room drinking instant coffee when the phone rang. He stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Linda, can we talk? In person? Earl was quiet for a moment. Maggie's Diner, noon. Earl, I don't think Maggie's, noon. Or we do this through lawyers. He hung up. Earl got there first, sat at the counter instead of a booth. Public, visible, not intimate. Maggie poured him coffee without a word, but her hand lingered on his shoulder, protective. Linda arrived 10 minutes late. She looked different. No makeup, hair pulled back simple, wearing jeans and a sweater Earl recognized from 10 years ago. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. They moved to a corner booth. Maggie brought coffee for Linda, watching her like a hawk watches a snake. I'm moving to Diane's, Linda said without preamble. In Idaho. Staying here's too hard. Probably for the best. Linda's hands wrapped around the coffee mug. She wasn't drinking it, just holding it. I didn't mean for it to go this way. Earl looked at her, really looked. After 38 years, he could still read her face, could see she was trying to find the words that would make him forgive her, make this easier for her. Yes, you did, he said calmly. You just didn't mean to get caught. Linda flinched like he'd slapped her, opened her mouth, closed it. No response came. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, Earl continued. We'll split things fair. I don't want to fight. The house? Sell it. Split the proceeds. I don't want it. What about the Chevelle? Your tools? I'll take my tools. You can keep the Chevelle. That project's done anyway. Linda looked down at her coffee. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The diner sounds filled the space. Plates clinking, someone laughing at another table, the coffee maker hissing. I did love you, Linda said finally. Her voice was small. Once. Earl thought about that. About the woman he'd married in 1987. About the first few years before everything went cold. Maybe. Long time ago. Linda's eyes were wet. Real tears this time. Not the performance kind. Because this was ending, really ending, and maybe some part of her hadn't believed it would. She stood, put on her coat, didn't try to hug him or touch him or make it mean something it didn't. Goodbye, Earl. He watched her walk to her car through the window, watched her sit there for a minute before starting the engine, watched her drive away. Maggie appeared at his elbow. You okay? Yeah. Earl took a drink of coffee. It had gone lukewarm. Just said goodbye to 38 years. Maggie squeezed his shoulder. Some goodbyes are gifts. The next week passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Earl's lawyer, a guy named Tom he'd known for 20 years, handled everything. It's pretty straightforward, Tom said. House sells, you split 50-50. She takes her car, you take your truck. Tools and personal effects divided by who owned what before marriage. That's fine. You could push for more, Earl, given the circumstances. Don't want to, just want it done. Tom nodded. Done it is then. Earl drove past the old house one afternoon. There was already a for sale sign in the yard. He didn't stop, didn't go inside, just kept driving until the house was behind him. That chapter was closed. Jessica found the rental on January 3rd, Two-bedroom, one-car garage, small yard, nothing fancy, but it was clean and quiet, and the landlord didn't ask questions about Earl's situation. "It's perfect, Dad," Jessica said, walking through the empty rooms. Earl signed the lease that afternoon. Moving day was January 5th. The breakfast crew showed up at the motel at 8 in the morning with Bill's pickup truck. "Let's get you out of this dump," Pete said. Earl didn't have much. His tools, his clothes, some photo albums, a box of books, the things that were his before Linda, and the things he'd kept separate after. It all fit in 2 trips. At the new place, they unloaded in silence. The way men work together, not needing words. When the truck was empty, Bill clapped Earl on the shoulder. "You need anything, you call." "I will." "We mean it, Earl." "I know you do." After they left, Earl stood in the middle of the empty living room, boxes stacked in corners. Echo when he walked. Too much space for one person. But it was his space, his walls, his silence to fill however he wanted. Jessica had taken the week off work, flew back from Denver on January 6th to help him settle in. "First project," she said, "we paint the garage." They spent 2 days on it. White walls, bright and clean. Earl set up his workbench along one wall, hung his tools on pegboard, organized everything the way he liked it. Jessica worked beside him, painting trim, handing him tools, not talking much, just being there. On the second day, while they were taking a break, sitting on the garage floor with sandwiches and coffee, Jessica said, "Why didn't you leave sooner, Dad?" Earl thought about it. "Thought I was doing the right thing, staying, providing. Turns out there's different kinds of right. You deserve more than martyrdom. Getting there." Later, while they were cleaning brushes, Jessica asked, "Are you lonely?" Earl looked around his small garage, his organized tools, his clean space. "Sometimes, but alone's different than lonely, still figuring out which this is." "I think you're going to be okay, Dad." "Yeah, I think so too." On the last day before Jessica had to fly back, she hung something above his workbench, a small wooden sign she'd made, Earl's Shop. Simple, handmade, the letters a little crooked. Earl looked at it and felt something move in his chest. First real smile in months. "Thanks, Jess." January 8th. Airport. Earl parked and walked Jessica all the way to security. She tried to tell him he didn't have to, but he wanted to. At the checkpoint, they hugged, long, Jessica crying a little into his shoulder. "I'll call you every Sunday," she said. "Promise." "I'd like that. And I'm coming back this summer. We'll start a project together. You can teach me." "I'd like that too." She pulled back, looked at him. "You're going to be okay, Dad. You know that, right?" Earl thought about the motel, about the church, about Linda driving away, about his small rental with empty rooms and tools organized on pegboard. "Getting there," he said. Jessica went through security, turned and waved. Earl waved back, stood there until she disappeared around the corner. Outside, he got in his truck, drove back to the rental, his rental. Inside, the house was quiet, empty. His coffee mug from this morning still on the counter, boxes still unpacked in the bedroom. Earl made fresh coffee, stood in the living room holding the mug, looking at blank walls. It was his, all his, no one to answer to, no one making him feel small, just space and silence and possibility. He started unpacking, hung photos, Jessica as a little girl, his parents from 40 years ago, an old truck he'd restored in the 90s, made the walls his own. By evening, the house felt less empty. Not full, but less empty. In the garage, he organized the last of his tools. Radio on low, same station he'd always listened to, space heater glowing orange in the corner, winter light fading through the dusty window. Earl put his hands on the workbench, looked at the empty bay where a car would go. "Need a project," he said out loud. And for the first time in months, he felt something like anticipation. January turned into February the way it does in Montana, slow, cold, with the kind of gray skies that make you forget what sunshine looks like. Earl settled into a rhythm. Up at 5, every morning out of habit, make coffee, black, his way, no one to please. Sit at the small kitchen table watching the news, eat breakfast, simple things, eggs and toast, sometimes oatmeal, nothing fancy. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy quiet from before. This was just space, room to breathe. Some mornings he'd wake up and reach for where Linda used to be, then remember. Those mornings were harder. The empty side of the bed felt like an accusation, but he'd get up anyway, make his coffee, keep moving. Wednesdays became sacred. 7 in the morning at Maggie's Diner, the booth waiting, the crew already there. "Morning, Earl." "Morning, boys." Maggie would appear with the coffee pot, pour without asking. Sometimes she'd squeeze his shoulder, sometimes she'd just nod. Either way, he knew what it meant. They'd talk about normal things. Dutch's new roof was going in, had to wait for the weather to break. Pete's granddaughter made varsity basketball as a freshman. Gene was thinking about selling his old truck, but couldn't quite bring himself to do it. You get attached to a thing, Gene said, even when it don't make sense to keep it. Earl understood that better than most. Bill asked about the rental. You settling in okay? Yeah, it's good. Small, but good. Small's all a man needs, Bill said, long as it's his. The divorce papers came through on February 10th. Earl drove to Tom's office, signed where he was told to sign, and that was it. You're officially a free man, Tom said. Earl looked at the papers. 38 years reduced to legal language and a judge's signature. Yeah, free. He drove past the old house on the way back. The for sale sign had a under contract rider on it now. Someone else's problem. Someone else's life. He didn't feel anything about it. Not anger, not sadness, just done. A postcard arrived a week later. Idaho postmark. Diane's handwriting. Linda's settling in here. She's getting help. Thank you for being kind in the end. Earl put it in a drawer. Didn't reply. Didn't need to. That door was closed now. Locked. And he wasn't the one holding the key anymore. At the diner one Wednesday, Pete mentioned that Travis was working overnight stock at Safeway. Saw him loading trucks at 2 in the morning. Looked rough. Heard his girl took the baby and left, Dutch added. Got a restraining order. Earl sipped his coffee. Poor bastard made his bed. And that was all he said about it. No satisfaction, no gloating, just acknowledgement that people reap what they sow. Sunday calls with Jessica became routine. 8 o'clock, like clockwork. She'd tell him about her week, about the hospital. She was a nurse practitioner at Denver General, about her friends, about normal things. He'd tell her about his week, about the Wednesday breakfast, about painting the spare bedroom, about how he'd planted tomatoes in the backyard, even though it was probably still too early. You sound good, Dad, she said one Sunday. Getting there. No, really, you sound lighter. Earl thought about that after they hung up. Lighter. Maybe that was right. Like he'd been carrying something heavy for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. February turned into March. The snow started melting. Mud season coming in, that messy time between winter and spring when everything's wet and nothing's quite solid. Earl noticed the crocuses pushing through the frost outside his kitchen window. Tough little things. Hanging on when everything else was still frozen. The days were getting longer, sun still up at 6 in the evening, the quality of light changing from winter's harsh white to something softer. Warmer. Earl felt it in his bones. Spring coming, always did eventually. Just had to wait it out. On a Saturday, in early March, Earl drove out to the used car lot on the highway. Wasn't planning to buy anything, just looking, something to do. The salesman, a guy named Rick, who Earl had known in passing for years, waved him over. Earl, looking for something? Just browsing. Well, browse away. Let me know if anything catches your eye. Earl walked the lot. Trucks mostly, some sedans, a few SUVs that soccer moms would drive. Then he saw it in the back corner. A 1968 Mustang Fastback, primer gray, hood sitting crooked, tires flat, the kind of project that would take a year at least. Earl walked around it, ran his hand along the fender, cold metal under his palm. She's a beast, Rick said, appearing at his elbow. Needs everything. Engine seized, body's got rust, interior's shot. What are you asking? Rick named a price. Earl countered. They went back and forth for a while. The dance men do when they both know the thing's worth something, but not as much as one of them is claiming. They settled in the middle. Let me think about it, Earl said. But he already knew. This was it. Not the Chevelle. That was Linda's past. The marriage that failed, the life that didn't work. This was something new, something his. He came back on Monday with cash. Rick helped him load it on a trailer. They towed it back to Earl's garage. Earl backed it in slow, careful. When he cut the engine and climbed out, he just stood there looking at it. The Mustang wasn't pretty, wasn't even close. But it was possibility, it was time, it was something to work toward. He popped the hood, looked at the seized engine, pulled out his toolbox, started taking notes, what needed replacing, what could be saved, what would take time and patience and skill. Sunday evening, Jessica called. Did you do anything fun this week? She asked. Bought a car. What, really? Earl smiled. A 68 Mustang, needs a full restoration. Gonna take a year, maybe 2. Dad? That's great. Jessica's excitement came through the phone. Can I come help this summer? You could teach me. We could work on it together. Something warm spread through Earl's chest. I'd like that, Jess. I'd really like that. They spent the next 20 minutes talking about the project. What color to paint it, whether to modernize the interior or keep it period correct, whether to upgrade the engine or restore it to stock. June, Jessica said. I'm taking 2 weeks off. We'll make real progress. It's a date. After they hung up, Earl went back to the garage. It was late, almost 9, but he wasn't tired. He turned on the radio, same AM station he'd always listened to, found his favorite thermos, poured coffee from the pot he'd made earlier. The space heater glowed orange in the corner. Winter light, what was left of it, came through the dusty window, pale and clean. Earl put his hands on the cold metal of the Mustang's fender, felt it warming slowly under his palms. He wasn't fixed, wasn't healed completely, still had moments where the loneliness crept in, still had nights where the empty house felt too big, still had that wedding ring in a drawer somewhere. Not ready to throw it away, but not ready to look at it either. But he was okay. Not happy in the way people mean when they're selling something. Just okay. Content. Moving forward. He opened the toolbox, selected a wrench, started working. Outside, the last of the snow was melting. The crocuses were blooming. The days were getting longer. Spring was coming, like it always did, like it always would. And Earl, 67 years old, divorced, living alone in a small rental with a project car and a daughter who called every Sunday, was finally living the life that was his. Not the life he'd planned, not the life he'd expected, but his. And that was enough. Some men figure these things out at 30, some at 40, some at 67, like Earl, and some never do. There's no prize for learning early, no shame in learning late. The only shame's in never learning at all, in spending your whole life thinking that staying quiet and taking it is the same thing as being strong. It's not. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is say no more and mean it. Earl spent 38 years thinking he was doing the right thing, keeping the peace, being steady, not making waves, and maybe in some marriages that works, but in his, it just taught Linda that he'd take whatever she dished out, that there was no bottom to his tolerance, that she could call him a meal ticket and he'd still be there in the morning. Walking away terrified him. The motel, the town gossip, his own daughter thinking he was the villain. But staying would have killed something in him that couldn't come back. Some things are worse than loneliness, and one of them is being lonely in your own house while someone treats your presence like an inconvenience. The truth came out the way it usually does, slowly, then all at once. And Earl didn't have to fight for it, didn't have to prove himself. Just had to stop pretending everything was fine. Had to let people see what he'd been carrying all those years. He's not remarried. Probably won't be. He's okay with that. Got his Wednesday breakfast, his Sunday calls with Jessica, his project in the garage. Got a life that's small and quiet and entirely his own. Some folks might think that's settling, but Earl knows better. He learned something at 67 that a lot of men never learn. You can't give away your dignity to keep the peace. Because once it's gone, there is no peace. Just the hollow echo of a life you're not really living. Spring came to Montana like it always does. The snow melted, the crocuses bloomed, and in a small garage on the edge of town, an old man worked on a car that would probably take him 2 years to finish. The radio played low, coffee steamed in a thermos on the workbench. His hands, calloused, sure, knowing, moved over cold metal that warmed under his touch. Outside, the sun was setting later now. The light through the dusty window was pale gold, new season, new start. Earl didn't think about Linda much anymore. Didn't think about the 38 years or what they'd cost him. Just thought about the work ahead, about Jessica coming in June, about time, finally, being his to spend however he wanted. Some things you figure out late. But late beats never, and Earl was just getting started.